The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to today's May edition of Payroll Question Time. I have to say, I'm really excited about today's episode. A, because we've got loads to get through. B, because we've got a full panel again, which is wonderful to see. Samantha's been off whale spotting and other things, so and great to have Lou back on the show as well. And C, because we've already, and it's a record here on PQT, had our first question submitted. It just popped into my inbox a couple of seconds ago. And that's my reminder to all of you joining us today. Already 96 of you have come on, more are still joining. If you have any questions for expert panels today, please do put them in the chat box. I will make sure we ask them in real time. And they do not have to be related to the subjects we tackle today. So if you have a payroll challenge that you just need some support with, please do put it in the questions box. I challenge you all to challenge the panel. So whatever that question might be, put it in there and we'll do our best to answer those as we go. Now, of course, we have selected a few questions ourselves and topics which we think are going to be relevant. And these are based on the feedback that you've given us in the past. So hopefully we're going to be covering some interesting topics today. In fact, we've got loads to get through. We've also got a number of polls. In fact, I think we've got 3 today. So we'll be getting you all involved as well. So please do give us your best responses. Please keep your fingers tuned to the buzzers when they go live so we can get your responses, and we'll ask our panel to comment on those throughout. Just to remind you all, we are recording this session, so you don't need to be busy scribbling notes. We will send you a copy of the recording and the slides, and it will also be published on the Payroll podcast as well. So 2 different ways to get it. So please just have your full attention, get involved in the polls, put in your questions, and you'll get all the notes post-event. And last but not least, there will, of course, be that survey. That survey is really important. That's the opportunity for you to tell us what you want us to tackle in future episodes of Payroll Question Time. So without your feedback, it means that we have to come up with those topics. We'd much rather they came through from you guys, so we're covering the issues that matter to you the most. And lastly but not least, you can see it on your screens. There is a disclaimer which I'm going to read out for you now. Just says the presentation today does not provide definitive answers to individual queries, and in some places takes views on matters which are uncertain. It is not intended to be relied upon in any specific context or as a substitute for seeking advice, legal or otherwise, on a specific circumstance, as each case may be different. Now, I'm going to be really quick because we've got lots to get through today. But for those who don't know me, my name is Nick Bay. I'm the founder of JGA Recruitment Group. I'm the host of the Payroll Podcast. I'm a member of Award 300, and I've been in this industry for 20 wonderful years. I love hosting the show. But enough about me. Let me introduce you to the rest of my wonderful panel, starting as I look at it from my left to my right, Lou Gray.
My name's Lou Gray. I'm an associate director at Evelyn Partners, run a payroll bureau team based in Guildford, and I do live in Northern Ireland. And I'm also very proud to say that I'm a board director of the Chartered Institute of Payroll Professionals.
Fantastic. And moving across, Simon Parsons.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Simon Parsons, Director of Compliance Strategies at SD Worx. I've been in the industry probably a little bit longer than Nick. I think I joined Centerfile, as it were, in 1984. And I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Payroll Professionals, have the MSc in Payroll Management through the CIPP University of Westminster, as it was then. I'm also part of the Award 300, and it's great to be with you today.
Super. That Centerfile comment reminded me of the Accrington Stanley advert with milk. People are going, Centerfile, who are they? Exactly. If you know, you know. Okay, going further along to Andy Nicol, our resident pensions payroll expert. Andy.
Hi everyone. Yes, I obviously worked for Regulator about 10 years now. Prior to that was all working in the payroll industry across lots of different organisations, including the software, and here to help with pensions today.
Fantastic. And last but not least, our well-watching expert, Samantha Johnson.
Hi, Nick. Yeah, I'm Sam Johnson. I'm Payroll Services Director at Danes Accountants. Previously worked for the CIPP as a policy lead there, and before that done a range of roles in both private, public sector and in bureau as well. So very much a payroller through and through.
Super. And for those confused by my little introduction there, Samantha has just come back from a wonderful holiday and she was telling us all about the whales she saw from the side of the boat, which sounded fantastic. Right, on to today's discussion topics then, lots to get through. Today we're going to be talking about P11D and P11B deadlines, What's the future of tax? The 4-day working week, EU rulings affecting and their impact on holiday pay, the importance of accurate payroll guidance, HR, payroll, pensions and finance. How do we bridge those gaps and those responsibilities to raise the profile of payroll? Pensions update, if we have time, of course, with Andy as well. And we will hope, if we do have time at the end of this 90 minutes, we'll go through some hot topics and Q&As as well. As always, keep putting your questions in the box. We'll answer those in real time. I have 2 questions ready to ask you all already, which is fantastic. So while I get those questions prepared, we're going to run our first poll. That's getting everyone here, 107 of you right now, involved if we can. The question is, we'll have a little attempt check. How was the previous tax year for you? 3 options here for you, all fine so far and good this year. Second, a few niggles but more confident now. Or lastly, far too stressful. Fingers crossed this time. So while we're waiting for those results to come in, I'm going to ask our panel our first question, which was the one that popped into my inbox just before we broadcast today's show. Comes in from Evelyn that says, can you please advise the best way or how to calculate holiday entitlement for 0 hours? We have just taken on a new company and the hours are random and very irregular each week. What is the calculation to ascertain their entitlement? Also, there seems to be no history. They have not exercised due diligence in keeping records. Simon, perhaps I can come to you with the first question of the day. If you can help Evelyn there, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. I think there are 2 halves really to the question. So you've mentioned entitlement. The entitlement for 0 hours workers is 5.6 weeks paid holiday leave per annum. It's the same as if they weren't a 0 hours worker. So that's one aspect. And then there's an element of how do you calculate that entitlement under regulation 15, 14, 15, 16, around there of the working time regulations. For the first year of employment, they get 1/12 of the entitlement each calendar month. And from the second year of employment, they get 5.6 weeks. Now, if they leave, they get a proration based on dividing 5.6 weeks by 365 days and multiplying the days from the beginning of the year until the date they leave. That's all days. So the fact they're on a 0 hours worker doesn't actually vary the entitlement. It's 5.6 weeks. Then it moves into the position of what's the pay. The pay for 0 hours workers is the 52-week earnings average going back up to 104 weeks. Any 0 weeks where they actually were not paid at all are required to be excluded. So it's a fairly complex calculation for many to do, but it's not based on how much they've worked, it's based on how much they earned. And in weeks they earn nothing, you actually exclude it. So 5.6 weeks entitlement, no matter how long they work for, an actual work time, and average earnings of 52 weeks.
Fantastic. So what about the second part of the question in relation to if there's no history? Does that matter, or has that been covered?
Well, yes, the employer is potentially in breach of the Employment Rights Act, and equally there are requirements under national minimum wage law to maintain hours worked. There are proposals under the EU leaving Brexit to get rid of the requirement for working hours for the working time regulations, which are in consultation or about to be. But under national minimum wage law, you are meant to keep the worked hours. So I guess if you're saying you haven't got the payroll earnings, because earnings is the thing that matters, and when they commenced employment, there's a little bit of a problem. But I'd say start the 52-week average now. And if you've only got 1 week of earnings, that's the average, 1 week of earnings.
Fantastic. Super, thank you for that, Simon. And Samantha, perhaps I can come to you if you're able to help me with this question. Are there any additional monthly FPS reporting requirements where an employee is paid and taxed under an Appendix 5 agreement?
An Appendix 5 agreement. I'll be honest, it's not one that I've come across before. I might have to defer this to somebody else, unless it's just a different term for something that I'm not familiar with, an Appendix 5.
Anybody else on the panel familiar that could tackle that question?
Yeah,
if not, we'll
I can help out, Nick, if you want. So Appendix 5 is an offset of foreign tax liability. There is no special reporting on the FPS apart from you report the full taxable pay and the tax applied, and the tax applied would be the UK tax liability minus the foreign tax. You don't actually report the foreign tax amount, you just report the difference between the UK liability and the foreign tax. Some solutions will have automated capability within it, for example SD Worx do, but some won't, and so may be a little bit troublesome to deal with, but the FPS reporting is fairly straightforward. Taxable gross is taxable gross. The tax is to be reported is the tax paid or due minus the foreign tax actually applied. You offset it, and it's the difference. And that's the same with the year-to-date value as well.
Super, super. Well, I kept the poll open for a bit longer than usual because we still had new attendees coming in. So welcome for those that are just joining us now. 113 of you. Let's see what these poll results look like. And I'll ask my panel to comment on these. So how was the previous tax year for you? 59% for those listening on audio only, all fine and so far good this year. 35% said a few niggles, but more confident now, and 6% said far too stressful. Fingers crossed this time. Lou, if I can come to you, how are these results what you'd expected or a little bit different?
Well, I think maybe I'm a wee bit jealous that everything was fine and so far so good. I mean, I'm really, really impressed and I'm very happy for you, she said very sarcastically. So, I mean, that's amazing for me. If you want to know about me personally, it was a stressful time this year because we had IT issues and glitches leading up to getting the software that we needed to go live in April. So we started on the back foot a bit and trying to get that resolved. And obviously sometimes then the niggles then continue into the month of April because you're still recovering from what happened in March. So for everything to be all fine and so far so good, if you would like anybody, I don't mind joining any new teams because that sounds fabulous.
Super, fantastic. Well, I'm hoping, I'm going to make the assumption that maybe many of the people have attended these previous PQTs and we've helped them prepare them so they can get through it smoothly. However, if you are one of those 6% where you say it really has been stressful, if you have any questions or any challenges you'd like to share with us, we can bring them to the panel. Please do put it in the questions box or let us know your comments as to why you found it so difficult. It'd be really good to understand where those challenges sat, so maybe we can address them or maybe even help you for next time round. But some interesting results coming in there. Let's jump back to the slides. I've actually got another question that's popped in as well. So I'm going to come to you, Andy, with this question so we can ask it in real time. I hope I've come to the right individual here. It says, hi all, if an employee is on unpaid personal leave, but they're in our salary sacrifice pension scheme, do we as the employer have to top up their pension as we would if they were on maternity leave?
So unpaid leave, did you say? Just want to double check. So
yes, employees on unpaid personal leave, but they're in our salary sacrifice pension.
Well, you need to see what the scheme rules are, but if the scheme rules are saying the employer contribution is, which is what the salary sacrifice value is, it's an employer contribution, is payable, then it's payable. But obviously, if they're on unpaid leave, there's no earnings to calculate. So what is the pensionable pay being paid in that period? Do you see what I mean? So if there's no pensionable pay because they're unpaid leave, then the employer contribution is, say, 8% minimum. 8% of nothing is nothing. So there's no payment to be made. But it's a valid point, you know, in terms of if we just expand it a little bit further and say, you know, where salary sacrifice exists, such as like on maternity leave, then the employer will be paying on the pay that would have been payable. So when SMP is just being paid, the individual might pay just on SMP, their actual normal contributions, but if in the salary sacrifice, then the employer will be paying the full contribution, the employee salary sacrifice plus the normal employer contribution based on the pay the person would have had they not been on maternity leave. So in some situations, yes, there is an employer contribution, and it could be a lot more because the salary sacrifice is an employer contribution. Hopefully that answers it, but please ask another follow-up question if that doesn't, or if anyone else has got any other thoughts, I may have missed a point or something.
Well, I'm just thinking, Andy, for zero pay maternity leave, there is no requirement for pension contributions. The Social Security law applies to periods of paid maternity leave. So I don't know if there's a misunderstanding that you have to maintain all contributions through maternity leave. It's not true. You have to maintain those contributions through paid maternity leave on the basis of full pay. When they go into an unpaid period, there is no requirement to contribute.
Unless the scheme rules require it. So if the
Unless
scheme
the scheme rules require
you need to do
it.
it. But during maternity pay period of 39 weeks, up to 39 weeks of SMP, yeah, then the employer needs to pay based on the pay the person would have had they not been on maternity leave. Which goes back to that very first question, perhaps, if you're on zero contracts, what is that pay? Well, you need to work out what would be an appropriate average pay for those people on zero hours contracts, which could be utilising the same as the holiday pay calculation, maybe utilising the same as the average pay you use to calculate high rate SMP, or some other reasonable method. It's not defined in legislation.
Well, hopefully that's helped. If it hasn't quite covered your question, Paula, please do back into the question box and we'll ask another question or try and clarify for you. Who's the best person today to ask questions regarding a mileage rate question? Samantha, Simon, or Lou?
Give it a go.
Simon, over to you. Here we go. And we're going to jump into this P11D subjects in just a moment, but last question before we do. My question is related to mileage rates for business travel. An employee is a manager who covers a specific area, but contractually it is described as home office based. When she travels to visit one of the multiple stores the employee looks after, what should be considered commute to work and what should be considered business travel? Business travel should be considered only when the travel is between two different business bases, or it can be counted from the employee's home address when they are traveling to a not usual workplace.
Mm-hmm. Well, the critical wording there is the latter, which is the not usual. So if you always go to the same place on a Monday and the same place on a Tuesday and the same place on a Wednesday, they could all be different. If you're going to the same place on a regular pattern, that becomes regular commuting. But if it isn't and it's more random, then anything as soon as you leave your house is business travel, is the view. Lou may have some thoughts there as well. I don't know, Lou, if that's an area you cover on P11D, but I think that the regularity is the issue. So if you always go to the office on a certain day, go on, Lou.
Yes, that's my understanding, Simon.
Is the question purely around the sort of tax position? Because I think often that's something that's confused. Ultimately, the employer can make a payment for whatever they want to, but it's whether or not that payment is tax-free is where those rules and regulations start coming in. And I think sometimes people assume that you have to pay the mileage, but you don't. But there is an option to get them tax-free if you fall within the eligibility criteria.
Cool. Well, we've got three P11D questions that have come in, I think, with our headline of our next topic in front of them. So I will get to those in just a moment. Thank you ever so much for the guests who are putting those questions in the box. We'll get to those as soon as we can. But P11D and P11B deadlines. We've had a quick temperature check there where Lou was very happy to see 59% of you going through a seamless end of year process. But how was the tax year end for our wonderful panel I see in front of me today? And what are the things that our attendees today need to remember? Perhaps I'll start with yourself, Lou.
In thinking ahead, I mean, the P11Ds, obviously, but then it's ERSs. There's the deadline for the ERSs, which is key. And I think very often that can be forgotten. Well, I feel it can with some of my experiences. Clients can put stocks and shares through the payroll and then not remember to complete an ERS that also has the same deadline in July as the P11Ds. And it is very important to be able to pick that up and make sure if it applies that form has to be completed. Working obviously where I work, payroll and these sort of P11Ds and the ERS submissions are very separate. So we work in alignment with the tax team who's able to help and support.
How was your year end? Lou, I know there were some computer challenges, but everything else as smooth as it could be?
Everything. I mean, the problem is if software doesn't work. It sort of does knock everything off in the planning, you know, because year end, if you have 450 plus clients, you're wanting to run everything smoothly before you even go into the April pay run. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. We ended up looking at some bits and pieces of work. So when software and processes let you down, it's about taking a step back and planning how you'll fix it, how you'll get it changed, and how you'll make sure that your clients are still happy and confident. And that can sometimes have a knock-on effect on motivating a team and motivating yourself, because it does clearly impact. If you have plans as a payroll professional, you need to plan your work and have a timetable of what needs to be done, and it's important to stick to that.
Sure, mind you, I guess when you have these challenges, it's what's how we learn from them and how we get to come the leadership roles that we have on this panel, right? You learn from the difficulties. How about the rest of our panel? Any P11D or end of year tax stories you'd like to share, or support our listeners today with things that might be useful for them as they continue to go through the process, or even for next year? Simon.
I'm happy to pick up a little bit with Lou's comment as well about employment-related securities, because increasingly we see that the withholding tax related to them is handled by a third party away from the payroll without true sight of real tax and real national insurance contributions. And quite often the view is those calculations are forced as the tax and NI calculation as an expectation. But they're not. They're just a withholding amount. So the tax and NI liability is something completely different. And I think a lot forget that actually it's just a withholding guess. It's not the real amount of tax and NI due. And quite often we see that actually the amounts calculated external are required as the reporting result. They're not. And the reporting may be wrong. So it's just remembering that. And just moving into P11D, we got the February shock announcement that no paper P11Ds are permitted this year for the 2022-23 tax year. And already we're aware that HMRC have been sending back boxes of paper to those who've submitted them to them and saying they're rejected. So you have a 6th of July deadline to get your P11Ds in electronically and deal with your Class 1A liability reporting on your P11DB. I did mine back in March from personally because I didn't have any and things like that. But get the adjustments for your payroll benefits on your P11DB form, because they're not payroll Class 1A. Class 1A is P11DB, even if you've payrolled. And equally, with sometimes we're worrying. I've seen a lot of requests in for the PSA reporting requirement, but actually the PSA deadline is not until the 22nd of October. So you do actually have much more time. But I imagine you've got this cycle of end of year activity. We think it's all done, didn't we, on the 5th of April, but it's not. We're all still busy dealing with the sweep up. And I'm sure with employment related securities, I don't know how Lou's finding it, but when they're dealing with foreign groups and things like that, the information comes through very late.
Well, that's an interesting question pop in. I don't know the answer to this because you're the expert payroll panel, but Ashley Dorman, who we know and love very well, has said, isn't it a P11D brackets B, not a P11B?
It is a P11D brackets B, or actually sometimes it's not portrayed with the brackets, just called a P11DB. But yes, it depends where you look. That's where the Class 1A return is put on, and that's an employer return. Well, if I cover that a little bit as well, quite often we find people trying to calculate individual level Class 1A. That applies to termination and sporting testimonials. Doesn't apply to P11D in the employer because it's the accumulation of benefits for the employer PAYE scheme with the 13.8 or the blended rate as it was for last year. Remember, it's not 13.8 for the current Class 1A, it's actually a blended rate, 14.53 from memory, that is applied and then you pay that as an employer as a lump.
I'm loving the attention to detail. This is what we get in the world of payroll, right? So good old Ashley there, trying to catch you out, Simon, which I love. Okay, so we've got a couple of P11D questions. Very simple one, I think, to begin with in terms of getting some engagement from our panel here is, are more people moving to payrolling benefits, or are P11Ds still key?
I think from my point of view, what I'm seeing is there's still a bit of a nervousness that particularly surrounds this dual tax in the same year. And my understanding when you look at HMRC's website is that shouldn't be the case. I'm almost certain I've seen that in black and white now, that they've said that it shouldn't be the case that you get taxed twice. But there is definitely a nervousness around it. I wonder if this digitalisation of the P11D will make a difference, but I suspect for most larger companies now, they're already digital, so it might not. You know, how HMRC ultimately drive that agenda is it's going to be a difficult one, because it does seem like there is a slow uptake on that.
And then from my point of view with clients, we would have new businesses starting up after April, and they want to payroll benefits straight away. So they don't understand why they have to wait for the following year to register to payroll the benefits. And it can take many hours of conversations to get them to understand the reason why that's what happens in the UK. But I mean, it's definitely a frustration that they don't understand. If they start a payroll up on the 1st of June, why can't they payroll benefits from the 1st of June? Why do they have to wait? Why can it not be a slicker process? And why can it not be easier? So maybe with the improvements with automation and technology, maybe that will progress sooner rather than later. I mean, especially as we are being impacted in payroll because of the HMRC strikes, and not being able to reach people on a telephone line or a chat line, not getting the responses. There's definitely a slowdown as we set up payrolls and getting communications from HMRC, which again, whenever you're dealing with clients in any business, is going to cause frustrations.
See Simon nodding along to your response there, Lou. Any added comments from Simon, or if we go jump into the next question?
Well, yeah, well, it's even worse at the moment, isn't it? Because they're all on strike. Yeah. So you won't get through to anybody because they're not there. Yes, I could come out with a certain politician's sort of words a few months back about if they go on strike, where they're going to picket outside their house. But maybe that's unfair, or it's the only time they go into the office. So we've got a strike situation on at the moment. So there are some challenges there. But payrolling, we get a popular spout of people going into payrolling each. Actually, a lot of them come very late. In fact, many come to us after the application deadline. So you're actually too late. So they then put it off another year, and then they come back to us again after the next year's application deadline. And I think you'll recognise that, won't you, Lou? I think there's an element of your application deadline is the 5th of April. You need to prepare months before. So the preparation for payrolling is around October, November, but ideally, if you're leaving it a little bit late, January, February. But if you're going March and April, you're probably too late. So remember that. The other aspect of payrolling is it's not the same as P11D. The timing is different. The tax in the end may be similar or the same, but the timing is different. And there's a number that take on company car reporting in the new year, and they can't get it right. So the FPS files are rejected because they haven't done the right benefit amounts. The challenge is P11D is in arrears looking back. So you're looking back at what you used to, what has happened in the year. With payrolling, you're looking forward. So you've got to predict what the values will be until the end of the year and change them if circumstance change. So it is a different world. Some may have the view that payrolling is cheaper. Not sure that's always the case because the work is different and there's still work to be done.
Yeah.
Well, let's look. We've got a lot of questions still popping in. We're going to ask Dave, you can move us to the next slide, because that will give people an indication of what we're talking about next. They can get their questions prepared. So we make sure we're trying to keep the things moving along. We will get to these questions in this section in a moment. Still got 4 or 5 questions to get through there if we can. I'm going to come back to you, Simon, because I'm keeping it with with business mileage. And the question coming in is this. Comes in from Paul. So I'm just going to scroll back up to the beginning of the question. Hi, we have inherited an employee who has a fully expensed business fuel card and his own car. He has not provided a business or personal mileage split. How do we enter this on his P11D? Do I need to submit a P11D for an employee that received benefits in 22-23 but left? Oh, sorry, that's moved on. It's my screen changing. Apologies. Yeah. Do we need to enter that on the P11D?
Yes, and it goes in a little bit like a company credit card spend. So it's not a mileage benefit, but it's a spend benefit by the employer. So you'd put it under credit cards. Can't remember which section that is. Is it section, I'm going to say from memory because it's come in section F, but I might be wrong. So there is a section on there, you declare the amount spent on the fuel. The individual can claim an offset for their business mileage. So they need to keep a record, and on their self-assessment return, put how many miles they've done if they're not reporting the business miles to you. If they're reported to you, you could actually deal with offsetting some of that expense against the fuel card. But for example, if they've done 10,000 miles, make it easy. They can put their business expense for using their own vehicle for business mileage as £4,500, and that would offset probably an element of the spend on the card, because I imagine the spend for that sort of mileage would only be about 3,000, depends on the size of the car. All right, of course, over 10,000 miles, they're only entitled to have a reclaim of 25 pence per mile. So yes, it's definitely a reportable P11D benefit in kind, or a payrolled item if you want to payroll it, based on the spend, the actual spend on the card.
Fantastic. I'm going to come to you, Samantha, if it's okay. Do I need to submit a P11D for an employee that received benefits in 2022-23 but left before that tax year? Or do I just write to HMRC with the details of the benefits provided?
No, P11D would still need to be submitted for any leavers. Yeah, so that's the way I would approach it.
Super, fantastic. What is the next question? Comes in from Magda. What is usual practice for part-time employees? I'll go back to you here, Simon, just because it's related to cars and randomly you become my car expert for today. What is usual practice for part-time employees with car allowances? Should we pro rata or pay as the same for full-time?
Well, that's down to the employer. So any car allowance scheme is up to the employer to set the rules. So there is no statutory rule or anything. It's whatever you as an employer decide you want to do. It would seem sensible probably to prorata it, but you don't have to. You can give them £1 million a year car allowance if you really want to. So there's no minimum and there's no maximum. I think there's an element of the employer has the position of deciding what's equitable and fair. There are some other considerations, which I guess part-time worker regulations and things like that. But it's same with pay. You give a proration of full pay, wouldn't you? You wouldn't give all pay. So you treat it as a half time or a half head. So I think you would probably do the same as the car, but I'm just into opinion area now, Nick, rather than anything required by law.
Okay, sure. And last question on the P11D process, yeah. or I'm not sure what it is, but in benefits in relation for the moment. Maybe Lou, if you feel okay to answer this question. If a benefit was only paid after the 6th of November 2022, does the blended Class 1A rate still apply? Simon's nodding, so I don't know if I'm sure, I don't mind.
Simon can answer the question.
There you are, Simon.
Simon.
Yes. Yeah, because the Class 1A liability is at the 5th of April, and at the 5th of April, the blended rate 14.53 applies. So it doesn't matter when the benefit provision is, it's a question of when the liability is. And at the moment, Class 1A isn't real time. So with sporting testimonials and terminations, it was the secondary NI liability at the point of payment. So you would have had the higher rate or the 13.8. But with benefits, it's assessed at year end. And at year end, it's 14.53, no matter when the benefit was provided.
Okay, fantastic. And while I've got you, Simon, a bit of a clarification point on your previous point. Can an employee then have a company car as well as a car allowance?
They could do, but the car allowance is, of course, subject to tax and national insurance. And the car would be subject to company car tax. But
okay,
why would they? It's not. It's usually instead of, isn't it? Again, that's down to employer practice.
Now, I don't know who's going to ask this question to, but I feel like I'm compelled to have to ask it. I can't be the only person that heard it.
Andy's got a point, Nick, I think.
Only from my own experience in payroll, that was that, you know, if you allow people to have a company car as a part-timer, you can't take the car back for 2 days that they don't work. So should you pay the full car allowance then to the same part-timer? So it is just down to what the business thinks is the right thing to do, really. But that's maybe where the person's coming from. Yeah.
Super. Now, I think I heard it as well, but the question comes in is, did I just hear a puppy? And if so, can the panel member please hold them up high and admit to who has a dog in the background?
my dear wife has taken her out.
The guilty party
he was coming out to say, can you play, I think.
I think we can't meet, which is a shame. Okay, super. We are going to get into the future of tax. I'm conscious of time. We want to speed through, but these questions are wonderful. Please keep sending them in. We want to make sure we answer all of your questions. Bit of a clarification then coming back in from Paul in relation to the earlier question, where we wanted to make sure we'd answered it. So I'll just read it as it goes. Thank you. I was wondering if, for example, the total was 9%, i.e. 5% employee and 4% employer, would we have to contribute the value of the full 9% of a normal basic pay? As I understood from your response, depending on our rules, we would deduct the 5% of the salary paid, which would be lower due to the unpaid leave. So would we need to top up the employer value so the contribution is 9% of full basic pay? Does that make sense? Only for unpaid leave, e.g. dependence leave.
Yeah.
I have to repeat that question.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, sure. So,
turn the volume.
Well, and there's an element here, Nick, is the protection is a maternity protection, parental leave, not an unpaid leave protection. Yeah, is what I suggest. But Andy will say, subject to employer scheme rules, but legally, Social Security law doesn't require any contribution if you're not paid. Yeah, but if you're on maternity leave, you have protections because it becomes a discriminatory element in relation to maternity, parental leave, paternity, etc. Yeah. Any thoughts there, Andy? Do you get the gist of the question? Lost you again.
Yeah, I went to mute somehow. Yeah, that's right. Unpaid leave is down to basically you just got to look at see what the pension scheme rules say about that. Because you can, like DC scheme versus a defined benefit scheme may have different things, but normally if it's unpaid, it's unpaid. There's no pensionable pay, there's no contribution due. And as I say, maternity leave, etc. That is the Equalities Act and the Maternity and Paternity Regulation, etc. Regulations 1999, I think. That is quite discreet, but from a payroll perspective, if you've got someone going on unpaid leave, you just need to check the scheme rules. But otherwise, it's just going to be what is the pensionable pay being processed? What are the contribution rates? There's no pensionable pay. The contribution, therefore, is nil. Yeah, that would be the norm.
Super, fantastic. Right, well, let's jump into the future of tax. We have got there in the end, which is fantastic. So let's jump in. We're going to talk about the digital transformation, digital system from end to end, question mark, tax automation, question mark, where we fit in and how to keep ahead. So let me come back to you, Simon. Give us a bit of an overview here, and let's bring this to life.
Yeah, sure. So there is a consultation on the future of tax. It's currently opened. I think it opened around the 22nd of March, so around the time of the budgets sort of area, that sort of thing following that. And it closes on the 7th of June, so not too long, about 2 weeks today is that. It will close, and it covers two aspects which potentially impact payrolling or payrollers. The other aspects are for other things like VAT, corporation tax, etc. But the two elements that really come under PAYE is development of promoting use of HMRC digital services. So the intention is to push things more down a digital means, not letters. Quite often I hear people say, oh, we've got this, I'll write a letter to HMRC. I think you do realize there's no one there opening or reading them really, or not very quickly. It's better to do it by digital if you can, but and equally the big thing that's been in the story these past couple of months, nothing to do with payroll really, is about repayment agents. So there's been a sort of a big thing about the fact that repayment agents are taking 40 to 50% of repayments due to employees because of business expenses or marriage allowances and things like that, when the taxpayer can actually do this themselves and get 100% of any tax refund due. Plus, we've got the removal of assignments, which meant that if you agree to an assignment to a repayment agent, that repayment agent would get your tax refunds forever into the future, and you could only end it if they agreed. So you couldn't arbitrarily, but that's all changed. They've in effect been outlawed. But under PAYE, there's also a question being asked by HMRC, and that's in relation to, can we do better than the tax code regime we have now, and what are the pain points? And the pain points generally about starters, leavers, change of circumstances, changing of bands. And so there's an opportunity to consult with HMRC, put in your ideas. An idea that's come from myself with the CIPP actually, and their task force panel as well, is why don't we have a new electronic means of informing starters, so that you get a code, you put in the code, you get your right to work confirmation, your tax code, your national insurance, all confirmed to the employer of what you need to do, and you don't have to wait for a P45. You know, are all these old forms out of date? Who gets a P45 on time? I don't know if you know, Sam and Lou have got comments there and whether they've been involved in that, but there are elements of there is an opportunity to consult on the future of tax.
I think it's really important that people have been given the opportunity to have the consultation and to be part of it and to be involved, so that we're having a say on what the future looks like. As Simon has said, getting a P45 from new employees can be very difficult. Also, if I look at the fact that we run payrolls for foreign businesses, there can be a lack of understanding on what's needed and the timeliness of what's needed. And sometimes, dare I say, some of the information on the government website isn't always clear, not just for people abroad who are running businesses in the UK, but even for, you know, every one of us. There's nobody, I don't think, could say, maybe apart from Simon, who is the Yoda of all payroll, who can look up the government website and think, well, that makes sense. There's so much of it that you read that you do need to go and talk to somebody about it, and, you know, to make sure that your interpretation is correct. So P45s are difficult to get hold of. Until recently, before they updated that new starter checklist, when you look at some of the questions that were being asked that weren't clear, you know, so there has to be an easier way of asking, and technology and automation and making it more digital can only be an enhancement, not only for businesses and employers, but also for HMRC, I would have thought.
Samantha, anything you'd like to add?
I suppose from my point of view, I think PAYE, you know, we've come a long way when it comes to digitalisation. I think if you compare it to other areas of tax, we operate real-time information. The feed from HMR to and from HMRC, whilst it's not perfect, is much better than it was. So P45s, for example, I've seen a lot of examples where the P45 will come and you don't apply it because you've already received the updated tax code, because you've sent the starter checklist and you've received the information from HMRC. So I think, you know, making improvements on that, I've no doubt there will be possibilities to make improvements, but I think we are ahead of the times when you look at other tax regimes. My nervousness around the sort of digital transformation piece is linked to what Lou was saying, that accessibility of information. Yeah, I mean, the whole reason for payroll question time is because people come to this because they probably can't find some of the answers elsewhere, that those more complex, detailed, specific questions, it's very difficult to throw that into Google and get a response that you can be confident on. So if we make things even more digital and you're less likely to call HMRC and you're going to be filling in a form, yeah, how are you ever really going to find the right answer? That's my nervousness around it.
I'd also add, just for those that are thinking that ChatGPT is the solution of all problems, actually, if you put any kind of payroll-related questions, I don't even work as a payroll processor, but I know the results it gives you are pretty poor and very, very inaccurate. So for those that think that, oh, it doesn't matter, we've got AI that can solve these issues in the future, based on what I've seen from ChatGPT, that may not be the case, which is why these kind of forums where people can ask questions in real time and speak to people that are actually doing the job, I think is so important. Sorry, Leo, I know you're going to make an additional comment.
Sorry, because I mean, what Sam said is correct. I mean, we have made leaps and bounds over the 30 years that I've been a payroll professional, you know, pulling out a Kalamazoo and doing the manual calculations. But a comment back to maybe HMRC is that we might make our RTI submissions on time, and that information is it does not always appear to be collated correctly, so it's not appearing on employers' dashboards. They can't interpret it. Whenever you're talking to people to try to get to the bottom of where the amounts have been allocated, I mean, what we discovered recently is that a client had made their payments accurately and on time, but it was reallocated incorrectly. So then penalties started to be issued to the employer because that money had been allocated to the wrong month. So it appeared that December hadn't been paid, but yet we'd managed to allocate all the months subsequently. So it's not just about the automation, it's about making sure that the automation is fit for purpose and that we're not just doing the automation to stay up to date and abreast of all the changes, but we need to make sure that what's in place is actually working. Sorry.
Yeah, the dog agrees. The dog agrees.
Oh,
fantastic. Well, I've got a couple more questions that have popped in. Let's jump to our next poll. We've got 114 people hopefully to get involved in the next poll, which is another temperature check. Would your company support a 4-day working week?
We're not listening to you, Nick. We're looking at the dog.
I know. I don't blame you. I've done the worst thing. I've introduced a poll just so you can't see any of us, including the dog. Maybe he'll be there when we come back. What would your company support a 4-day working week? Response options for those in audio only are: we already do, yes, it's on the cards, we are weighing up our options, no, and we probably won't anytime soon either. So while we're waiting for those responses, a couple of questions that have come in. One I've done my best to answer directly, but I'll just ask the panel in case anything additional you'd like to add. Really good post comes from Katie that says, good afternoon, it's my first webinar, it's very informative, so thank you. But as a newbie to the payroll world, what advice would you give to someone starting out in their payroll career? Any literature you'd recommend, courses? She also says, I love your podcast, Nick. So there you go. Well, you can also get a copy of this audio later on as well. All the PQTs are on the payroll podcast. So just to give the panel a bit of a head start, I've already responded recommending the CIPP, recommending the Payroll Learn Centre, the Payroll Apprenticeship Programme, and the Payroll Org for global payroll related information. Is there anywhere else you would recommend that she went to help give Katie a bit of a head start in her payroll career? Great to see someone so ambitious and keen to learn. Maybe I'll start with yourself, Sam.
To me, it's all about building that payroll community. You know, you're probably, that's where you're going to find your answers to those more complex questions. Build that community, stay humble, you know, open to learn and open to picking up new things. But yeah, use LinkedIn, use sessions like this, use all the networking sessions that have all restarted now. That would be my recommendation.
Great. How about yourself, Lou? Obviously, working as a board director at the CIPP as well, and Samantha's obviously also been at the CIPP. It's a brilliant company for an organisation for supporting people on their payroll journeys. But anywhere else or any other literature you might want to recommend? I
mean, what Sam has said, networking and getting to know other payroll professionals. I mean, I think there was some conversations last night on Facebook, social media, about somebody wanting to learn more. And I mean, there's nothing better than reaching out and asking somebody for a virtual coffee. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time if somebody's contacted me. I'm happy, as many payroll professionals are, on having, you know, a 10-15-minute virtual coffee, talking over and letting people see that they're not alone and that there's help out there. But I mean, I do take on what you said, Nick, as well. I mean, to me, being a member of CIPP, even the fact that I'm a board member, was always important, because there's the advisory line that's able to help answer questions if you're a member. And that opportunity leads you to other networking events where you can meet up and build a network of people that you trust and that you know give you good information, and that you're learning from them and seeing how they learn and develop.
Absolutely right. And it's a really, really supportive community, the payroll community. I don't know if I've released an episode of the podcast today, which is actually taken live from the Payroll Congress in Denver. And it will give you a bit of an insight, if you're new to the industry, just how supportive, how community-led it is. I don't think there's any other industry quite like it. It's a very supportive, in my view, non-competitive group of people who are very, very happy to support and help the careers of others. So if you have any questions, do reach out. Obviously, I can also help you put you in touch with people that might be able to support you in your journey as well. So do reach out if you need to. Hope there's some good advice there. Networking, absolutely critical. I do also have a question that's come in, so I'll ask this as well. Comes from Beth. Quick question regarding P45s from previous tax year, 2022-23. So Simon, I'll come to you for this one. Can I have your thoughts, please, on recording previous year taxable pay and tax in the current payroll system? The risk is, it could be recorded for current tax year. Also, is this even still a requirement? I'm sure Simon's picked that up.
So
sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, go back now, Simon.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, do you want to answer that, Lou?
I was going to say that if it's in the previous year, I would never put it on the system. And you can refer to the government website to see that it isn't relevant. It's about moving forward. I don't know how you feel, Simon.
Yeah, exactly the same. So last year, it doesn't really matter. Some systems will collect it because you're just entering the P45 form. But if the dates are right, it should just handle it. But you're right, some people might mistake it. Equally, you've got to be careful with the use of the tax code. The P9X used to tell you what to do, but nowadays they refer you to an online tool to enter the details, and it'll tell you what tax code to apply instead. I'm not sure if that's overly helpful, especially if we've got thousands of them to do, but that's what HMRC do these days. So no, you don't need it. It's not reported on the FPS. Even in year, it's not reported on the FPS anymore, but you do need it in year, otherwise your cumulative tax position won't be right.
Super. Right, let's have a look at some of these poll results. How many of you are working with a 4-day week? We've got, for those in audio only 60% say we already do, 0% say it's on the cards, 23% say we are still weighing up our options, and 71% say no and probably not any time soon. What are your thoughts on those results, Sam?
I'm surprised that the no is so low. In fairness, I thought that was going to be at about 90%. So it's nice to see more people embracing it, because I I think there is definitely still a hesitation around this. There was obviously the trial, and I believe it was quite successful, but you know, it's a big change to move from a 5-day to a 4-day standard week. And I think there's that assumption that, well, if my business is operating at 4 days, but a business I'm working with is operating at 5 days, we're not going to have the people to support that. And until those sort of minds start to change, I don't expect those results to move much more. But great to hear the people that are embracing it, because from a wellbeing perspective, I'm certain that's probably driving that agenda.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump into that question then. We've got a whole topic about the 4-day working week to dive into this in a little bit more detail. While waiting for that slide to come up, I've got a quick question that's come in, so I'll come to you, Simon, for here. Is the panel aware of any plans by HMRC to fix their PAYE variable direct debit so that funds are taken on the correct date and late fees are not applied due to them paying themselves late, even though the late fees are subsequently removed every month? I knew you'd laugh at that one.
I'm sure they do have plans at some point, when I've got absolutely no idea, and it's something I've taken up with because Richard George is normally on the panel, and Sam, did you used to be on the I forgot what they call themselves, EPG? Yes. The sorts of things we discussed there, and also on what's called the rep body group. So it is being highlighted. The response at the moment from HMRC is it will sort of come out in the wash and be fixed, and you won't have the debt, rather than moving forward with the date yet. But you'd hope they would do soon, because it's a new service and they're trying to encourage us to operate the DD. I'm always a bit suspicious of it myself, because the DD is on a basis of your FPS and EPS return, so they're guessing what amount to deduct. Guessing, maybe that's an unfair term, but what I guess I'm hinting at is the HMRC account for lots of you, I suspect, doesn't balance to your payroll. So if you're small, limited, and not had much movement, it probably does. So the DD should be right, shouldn't it? If it's complex and big, I imagine your accounts are all in misbalance.
Right, fantastic. We are going to jump into this 4-day working week, but the question's still coming in thick and fast. So I'm going to get through these first if we can. We have taken on a new company. All the employees are 2P'd over. I thought I needed to enter the year-to-date and tax codes from the final pay from the previous provider, but the tax office said no. They need to complete a starter checklist. What is the correct thing to do? We will be using the same PAYE reference on the previous company.
You need the year-to-dates, don't you? Brought forward as year-to-dates, and make sure the payroll IDs are correct.
Did they go live in April?
I
mean, did they go live in April?
Yeah.
Or was it May?
Depends on the year.
Sorry, Lou, I missed the audio there. Say again.
It did. I mean, does it go live in April, or are they not going live until May or June?
Haven't got any clarification here. Maybe if they can drop back in, we can come back.
Because if anything after April, you all, as Simon said, you need the year-to-dates. Otherwise, it has a real big impact throughout the year, but especially at year-end. But it will impact employees throughout the year, especially what Simon's referenced to, the employee IDs, because they are critical. I mean, they're so critical, they actually have a page on the government website that is quite it is very user-friendly. It is very clear. I don't often say that, but it definitely is.
Okay, good. Hopefully that will help. As it go live 1st of July.
So definitely, you can't operate without year-to-dates. You need that information, and it must be on the payroll. They maybe just run lucky on the day on who they spoke to at HMRC. Some novices maybe don't fully appreciate, and it's very difficult once you've set up a payroll and you haven't got the year-to-date. Not all softwares can easily manipulate and be turned around to be able to have that information retrospectively input.
Yeah, and in this case, Nick, I think the question is saying it's the same PAYE scheme. So they've not left anybody. It's a continuous employment. So there's no new start date and there's no end date. It's actually the same employer. So although the ownership of the business may have changed under 2P, etc., If the PAYE scheme is the same, the employment hasn't ended and started. It's just continuing.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I hope that helps. Let's jump into the 4-day working week. Interestingly, a good friend of mine, who is another recruitment owner, owns a company called MRL, was one of the pioneers of the 4-day working week in the UK. You may have seen him on many of the BBC documentaries. He seems to be featured every single time this topic comes up, certainly in my world anyway. But I'd love to find out when we take here. Let's talk about employee productivity, staff retention, and of course, the most important thing in relation to the context of this webinar, the payroll processing impact. Bank holidays, there are going to be 9 in 2023. Simon, if you can kick us off.
Oh, it's a difficult one. I think this is all industry and job related question, isn't it, on 4-day week? For some jobs, it's similar with home working. For some jobs, home working works. For other jobs, if you're meant to be in front of a customer, how does home working in a building, how does home working work? I guess if you can do remote calls and things like that, but if you're selling a bag of potatoes, you can't really do that remotely in quite that same way, unless it's going in the post maybe, but then you can't test the quality. So there's obviously there's industries and jobs where you physically have to be on premise, and there are industries where you don't. And I think other is on availability. I mean, a lot of the work that I've probably done historically, Nick, I don't have to be available 5 days a week to do it. I just need to get the job done. And in effect, I can do that at any point so choosing. So your work time could work with that basis. So 4-day week, I guess if you're on schedules or patterns of work, so you've got coverage, great, but it won't fit every industry, but it will fit some.
I'd agree. I mean, there's been the mixed reports in the world of recruitment, obviously that I operate in. David Stone, the individual I mentioned earlier, has had great success with this. But there's also 2 types of 4-day working weeks. There are those that condense 5 days into 4, and there are those in David's instance where actually he says 4 days is 4 days, and you earn the same salary you would have earned over 5. And I'm not expecting you to do any extra hours for that. But there are 2, certainly in the world that I operated in recruitment, there are a lot of people trialing both types, reducing 5 into 4 with longer hours, having a longer weekend, and also actually no requirements to additional hours, but just keeping the same salary on a 4-day working week. Now you can understand why that would have a big impact on both attraction and retention of staff, because wages aren't changing. There's no additional hours. You're getting paid the same, but you get an extra day free a week. And the productivity in my industry in particular has been mixed in terms of the reports. Very good for retaining talent, but has the performance necessarily followed suit? I think that the jury's still out. But what's going to be the processing impact, though? That's the most important thing in context of this webinar. What are the payroll considerations we need to consider?
I think from my point of view, if I was to move sort of forward to something like a 4-day working week, it would be on that on a bit of a scheduling basis. So you end up still with a Monday to Friday operation, but you sort of splitting your resource across that based on 4 days. I think for payroll, that's likely to be the only way that it would work. Different, I suppose, if you're in-house. So if you're in-house and you can build your payroll cycle around a 4-day working week, then it could be possible for everyone to have the Friday off. But working in a bureau environment, I think it would be difficult to service all the clients without being open those 5 working days.
Interesting. How about yourself, Lou? What's your view on this?
I suppose, I mean, I work in a business where we do have flexibility and we can take into account what people need or want. But I think I'm mindful of running a team of individuals who all have separate client portfolios. The clients are running a business a 5-day week, so they would not take into consideration that their dedicated payroll contact would not be available. And then I have to be mindful of what impact of somebody working a 4-day week will it have on other team members who on that day would have to pick up the work that they're covering. So, I mean, I am open to it. I'm just looking at it from an operational perspective and mindful of the knock-on mental health effects it might have on other team members and how they juggle their work. And, is it a particular day? Because then I'm thinking of the payroll schedules for each client. Every month is different. Payday, if it falls at the weekend, the work's brought forward. So you already are taking into account an increased workload. And I mean, to me, it would just be what Simon said. It would be dependent on the business, but very much as we're client orientated, we'd have to be mindful of the clients as well.
We can also tell that Andy's dog's definitely in favour of 4-day week. He's waiting for a walk there, Andy, trying to pull you out. What's your view?
Very good. I did, from my perspective, interesting enough, on the 4-day working week, I'll be thinking about systems and thinking, oh, I used to divide my daily rate by 260 days near. Now it's 52 times 4. Or my qualifying days for SSP, are they, if I'm using working days, are they now, instead of Monday to Friday, I've now got to change my working patterns and stuff. So it's just, there's a payroll processing impact, or could be. Do you still stick to 5 qualifying days, or do you have 7 qualifying days? What's your SSP thing? And if you're tracking that, and when you divide someone who's leaving partway through a month or starting partway through a month, what method are you using? So all those sort of intricate little things, isn't there, as well?
Simon's got anything you'd like to add to that, Simon? You've got bank holidays 9 in 2023, an extra consideration here, so let's bring that to the fore.
Well, yeah, and that's partly of it on the 4-day week is what happens to holiday entitlements and bank holidays if you're paying them in addition or instead of. So there are other implications. But yes, it's just a reminder, really, that point that there are 9 official bank holidays in 2023, January to December. I guess if you operate April to April next year, there might be 10. I'm trying to think when the new Good Friday falls. So because Easter floats between March and April, you may have years that just don't balance up. Now, the statutory position, of course, is it's limited at 28 days, 8 in effect 1.6 weeks to cover bank holidays. But if you're in a bank holiday year that only had 7 or 6 because of the way the calendars falls, they're still entitled to 8. So it's an element of looking at contract position, but I think that was just there to think what happens. And if you're on bank holidays, we'll all work Mondays and Fridays to make sure we get those all off as bank holidays, won't we? Won't come in on Wednesday.
And then just remember, sorry, Northern Ireland has 11 bank holidays. Yes. So that's 9 in England, sorry.
Yeah.
You win. It's got a couple of questions that have come in as well. First from David, a 4-day working week. It's worth remembering that not all businesses can operate a 4-day week, which is what Simon was intimating at the start of this topic. I represent a school / educational multi-establishment trust, and of course the school week dictates how the working week operates. We do, however, have a flexible working policy and remote working possible for those that can be supported. Absolutely right. Not right for every sector, that's for sure. And then another comment comes in from Andy that says, comment on the 4-day working week. We won't be doing it anytime soon, but we do have a couple of customers who have started doing this. One started testing during COVID, and it was so popular they made it permanent, reduced from 39 hours over 5 days to 36 over 4, but still on the same annual growth. So more observation there. So we are seeing it happen more and more, that's for sure. It's definitely a newsworthy item, but still, I think the poll results 72% not looking to do it anytime soon as we stand. Let's see how this sits. We'll do PQT in May 2024 and see if this needle has moved at all. Right, let's move to our next subject then. We've still got a fair bit we're going to try and get through, but I'm conscious of time. This relates to the EU rulings and their impact on holiday pay, adjustments to working time regulations, rolled up holiday pay, which is something we talk about quite a lot on PQT, and the EU rights versus UK specifics. Simon, can you kick us off?
Sure. Just to confirm that there are proposals. So the government were intending on removing rafts of EU legislation and bringing in alternate UK. Some of that has been canned, but they have announced over these past few weeks that there are going to be proposals for combining the regulation 13.13a. 13 is EU law, 4 weeks in holiday pay entitlement, and 13a is an additional 1.6 United Kingdom entitlement, that they will combine that into a single 5.6 weeks entitlement at some point. We don't know what the proposal is yet. We haven't seen it. It's just been announced that that's what they're going to do. The other aspect is they're actually proposing potentials for introducing rolled up holiday pay, which is an interesting concept since they were outlawed by the European courts in 2006. I could probably tell you I think that was the Robinson Steele v RD Retail Services case of 2006, where rolled up holiday was outlawed, although we do come across employers that still pay rolled up holiday even today, even though it was outlawed all those years ago, 17 or 27 years ago, whatever it is, 17. So there's the thoughts. But the interesting aspect of combining that into a single UK is that lots of the rulings in case law were European based. So you've got, for example, Robinson Steele. Does that mean that that's going to get knocked out? We had the Lock case and British Gas, etc. What's going to happen with them? Because some of those rulings applied to the 4 weeks as a minimum. There wasn't a ruling on the 1.6 weeks. Now, Bayes or DBT or whatever they want to call themselves these days would say in their guidance you should consider paying it across the lot, but they equally say that the rulings relate to Regulation 13, not 13A. Well, if they're combined into a single regulation, does that change the position on overtime, commission, etc., etc., and the EU rulings? Do they get inherited into the UK, or are they dropped and move aside? The rolled up holiday one is interesting, following the Brazil case, as Brazil wasn't about rolled up holiday, but it was about the 12.07% usage, which some of the consultation was exploring. So next consultation has gone out saying, is that a method that should be considered? And I don't know if that relates to the rolled up and holiday announcement of 2 weeks ago, but I suspect it is. Is that good for a starter?
Yeah, I think that's a full overview there. Comprehension. Sure. Any additional comments from you or Samantha or Andy you'd like to add in? There you go. That's
I suppose just to say from my point of view, I think we are desperate for simplification of the holiday pay rules. We really are. So if this can take us a step towards that, then I would back it. And I think rolled up holiday pay, part of the reason for it being illegal is because it's open to manipulation. I think it, and it is about employee rights, but equally, I think if it's used in the right way, it does make sense. If you've got a contractor who's coming in for 6 months and wants to deliver a project for 6 months, do they need to sit and work out the exact holiday times? No, they probably don't. They probably just want that rolled up holiday pay. Same with 0 hours. I'm a 0 hours person, but I need to book off next week, despite the fact that I'm not due to work next week. It's such a strange concept. So I think some of these things, if we can be a bit more pragmatic about holiday pay, whilst keeping those protections in for employees, then I would definitely support it.
A lot of it comes down to communication. I mean, rolled up holiday pay, one of the issues, of course, was it wasn't being communicated to temps and contractors by other recruiters. They were saying hourly rate is this within the inclusion of holiday pay, and they get their pay and realise it's not on top, and that's due to the misinformation or the way it's been delivered. Certainly in my industry, it did cause problems for the companies that were doing that. So I understand why it was outlawed from the industry that I work in, because someone thinks they're earning one thing and realizes that they're not, because it was all rolled up. So as long as that communication piece is made, maybe that's where we make the simplification easier, that it's a legal obligation to make this communicated in the right way. I would be in full agreement. It seems a bit strange otherwise. There's another poll here. I'm conscious of time. I want to get the last poll out if we can. And this actually relates to where you get your information from in relation to payroll process requirements. So 97 of you still online watching us, which is fantastic. So this is the last poll of the day. Where do you tend to get your information on payroll process requirements? 5 options for you here for those in audio only. Option 1, government site /updates directly, CIPP or other payroll membership organisation, social media or external blogs, colleagues or internal company guidance, or just PQT. So if that is the only place, then great, but tick that box for us. Let's have a look at those poll results. This may also be of interest to the individual that posted in about how they can progress their career here. So some good opportunities perhaps to discuss where they get their information from. And in just a moment, we're going to talk about the importance of accurate payroll guidance. So this is why we're asking the question in advance, because there is a danger out there of getting misinformation. I mentioned earlier about certainly the dangers of ChatGPT. It's amazing for many, many things. In my personal experience to date, payroll is not one of them. I've tried to test it with various different prompts, and most of the information is either drastically out of date, and that's of course because ChatGPT itself is only updated, I think it's September 21, and it's not up to date at the moment, but also because it just doesn't go into the detail. It also grabs its information from many, many sources, many of which will not be associated with the payroll profession like you good people are here today. So that's just one example, but I think it's an important thing to raise. So we're waiting for those results to come in. I wonder if the panel can perhaps just expand on that a little bit more, expand on where you think we should be getting our accurate payroll guidance from, the benefits of getting it from the right places, and of course the dangers of getting it from the wrong places. Who would like to take us off?
I'll start if you want, there's no problem. I've got plenty to say on this topic. I think my concern about where people get their information is from where I am from a social media perspective. I can see that there's many groups and people are very helpful with the information that they give, but there's no facts to back it up. It can very often be opinion, and it mightn't be based on what the government website says. It might contradict what the CIPP message is being shared, and very much as well what the Learn Centre, who have a membership line that you can be part of. I think you have to be very careful with who you trust and who you build a relationship up on payroll information and knowledge, because we do not know everything. Before the call, I said to Sam today, every day is a learning day, and every day this week I have learned something that I didn't know or understand ever before, and it always surprises me in payroll how much there is. It's the impact of getting that information and that knowledge share on. Very often I say to teams when I pull them together, for example, pension is so underrated. If you get a pension wrong today, in 40 years time when that person retires, they will feel the result of not getting that pension set up correctly. And very often on some of these forums, it can become quite toxic. And it comes back to, is there evidence to back up what you have had shared? I always would say to somebody, can you show me where to find this on the Gov website? Is there, Simon has his own blog that is so super helpful and useful to refer to get an idea of where to start looking, so that you're building up a knowledge and background on facts, not just a story. Because very often you hear in payroll, it's always been done that way, but why was it done that way? And about understanding that. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's where PQT can really help in terms of the nuances of why things are done certain ways. And we know the reason we have this PQT is because payroll is complex and it needs experts to help you understand it. Let's have a look at some of these results, and I'll ask for perhaps Simon your commentary on the poll results as they come in, and we'll tackle this subject in a little bit more detail. So for those in audio only mode, the results we've got here are 71% get their information from government sites or updates directly, 20% from the CIPP or other membership organisations, 5% from social media, 3% from colleagues, and 2% from PQT, which is absolutely fine. So Simon, what are your thoughts on those results? And perhaps if we can just get back to the slide, that'd be great.
Yeah, they're interesting, aren't they, Nick? So I think that's good, but we're from an experienced audience, I think, here. And so it's good to see that we are going to the government sites. I've got to say they're not the easiest to navigate at times, and going to the CIPP because you've got experts that feed into that sort of information. I guess Lou and I are probably on similar social media outlets, and we see some of the interaction that takes place. I suspect that they're mainly smaller employers, but not always. but we see a lot of misadvice. Is that right? I mean, it's myth. What I think it should be rather than what it really is. And I think even to the person who was asking about training, sometimes it's good to go in and fresh mind. If you're new, it's good to read official stuff if you can. CWG2 is a good guide to look at. It may be confusing, and test it, but sometimes our old bias and traditions distort our view of reality. And so, yeah, very interesting statistics there. Fantastic for the 2% they get from PQT. I suspect that you should probably look a little bit at somewhere else as well, maybe.
Yeah. I've just added as well, I'll do some championing for you here, Simon. You've obviously got a fantastic site with the latest payroll information as well, called payadvice.uk. So I put the link there in the chat for those that want to follow. Hopefully, those that join PQT will know that Simon's a bit of a payroll oracle. So that's something that even myself and our team will go to for advice, as well as the other resources we've discussed. So do have a look at that if you get a moment. What are your thoughts here, Sam?
I think, just to echo Simon and Lou, really, it's really important, regardless of where you go. If you go to a colleague, if you go to even to the CIPP, get that backup with the legislation, with the government websites, because that's your source. Then that's your audit trail for where the answer is from. You might be talking to a colleague who knows exactly what they're talking about, but it will only help you if you can get them to direct you to the source of that information. But equally, I suppose, payroll isn't all about that compliance piece. There are other sides. So talking to colleagues about ways of working, managing teams, what they're doing for recruitment, systems, your community is always a good place to go just to get some ideas. But I think that misinformation piece, particularly around some sites on Facebook, I would say, are I've seen some interesting comments on there, to say the very least. So beware of them.
Yeah, for sure. How about yourself, Andy?
Yeah, I agree. Go to the source of information best. I was only looking earlier at a webinar that someone had produced on automatic enrolment, and I'm thinking, no, that's not right. That bit's not right. So I'm going to go back to this person. I won't give any indication. It's not a payroll person, but it is a legal firm, and just say it's almost right, but not quite right, and that's where the risk can be, where if you follow exactly what was said, you'd get it wrong, but the gist is right, but the detail can be wrong. So, but also things like going to conferences, the payroll conference or the various did a lot quite good. They're good because you get the networking as well as normally get the expert speaker speaking, and then they're normally available at the end either for Q&A or to go and ask personal questions off, and that's good. You want to get the source really, and the groups that people attend, the EPG and all these things, that's really helpful because that gives advance notice of things, positive feedback. It also means that the experts you're talking to are keeping up to date themselves with all the changes coming in. So like Simon and the blog and all those sort of things, I think they're just really good, But yeah, CIPP and all the rest of it, good.
Yeah, I would just add as well, I only said that this happened about 3 weeks ago. I got pitched by someone who wants to be on the Payroll podcast, talk about their new payroll software launching in the UK, and could we give it some traction? And I said, well, where are you in your journey, and who are your clients, of which there were 0 at the moment. And I said, well, have you connected with other organisations like the CIPP? They said, who? I had no idea who they were. I'm not a payroll person. I asked some very simple questions about UK payroll, because obviously there's no point being on the show unless you really have a solution that's going to give us something new. And it was very clear to me that it was something that they obviously created, but didn't really have a clue about UK payroll. It's quite alarming because they're going to be selling software to the industry, and they're the people you'd hope to be able to rely on. I think people have seen a real opportunity to come into what is a very potentially lucrative market space, payroll. And the pandemic has thrust it into the limelight, and people are spotting opportunities where they can make services and make money and sell solutions to those that perhaps don't have the knowledge or the understanding to know if it's accurate or not. So I think there are a few dangers lurking in the waters at the moment in the world of payroll for both misinformation and for potential providers coming in who haven't necessarily done their own due diligence or their own work to really understand the market. But that's a little bit of an insight to a call that I got about 3 weeks ago, which I thought was quite interesting. It was a company which was not based in the UK, but about to launch a UK payroll solution. I've got a question that's come in, and I don't know if our panel are going to be able to answer this one. I'll say it off the bat, but if you can, please, whoever thinks they're the best suited to ask. It's a Canadian payroll-related question. Does anyone here have any Canadian payroll expertise, or shall I ask the question if anyone has the answer? Or shall we just, we're talking about misinformation, we can just say we don't know the answer, which is also fine. The question is this. Good morning, everyone. July the 1st, Canada Day, falls on Saturday, weekly off. So we observe the holiday on July the 3rd. We have a department that works 24/7. So the casual staff working on July the 1st, will she get holiday premium pay, or only the casual staff working on July the 3rd will get a holiday premium pay? Is that something we can confidently answer here, or should we go away and try and come back to that with our survey response?
No is the answer, unless there's regulation in Canada. But if we took the equivalent of if there was something equivalent in the UK, there is no regulation on it. So it would be down to the employment agreement, terms and conditions. So for example, in the United Kingdom, there is absolutely no right to be paid for a bank holiday. Your contract may give you a right, but there is no statutory right to it. In Canada, I don't know if it's a statutory right to Canada Day for it, because you'll have people that are serving hot dogs, popcorn and things, so they're working. So it may not be a statutory right there either. And premiums are usually under the terms and conditions of the employment. So there is no right to double time on bank holidays either in the UK. But for Canada, we don't really, I imagine the panel don't really know. Because sometimes there are agreements.
One thing to add on that is when I was in the role with the CIPP, I had a contact with the Canadian Payroll Association out there. They've recently rebranded to the National, I was just Googling, the National Payroll Institute. So, you know, if they work with Canadian payroll law a lot, maybe that's a place to go first of all to join as a member and start to get some info from them. But yeah, National Payroll Institute, they're called now.
Like fantastic advice, and we've covered that on. Excellent. Well, I'm conscious of time, which does mean we're going to miss one topic today. We will make sure it features near the top of next month's PQT, which is of course all about bridging the gap between departments, between HR, payroll, pensions and finance. It's not legislation related, so we're not missing any vital information that's going to impact your payroll next month, but we will make sure we cover that in our next PQT. Andy, we've got a very short amount of time. Is there any specific or important pensions updates we need to be aware of to make sure our audience today are fully up to date over the course of the next month? You'd like just to raise awareness to?
No immediate changes as such. Still waiting to hear about lifetime allowance, annual allowance, and what the impact of those becoming. The annual allowance going from 40 to 60,000. That's the amount you can put into a pension scheme in a year. And the lifetime allowance, the 1.1 odd million pounds worth, which has been removed. So we're just waiting to find out what the full details are because of the exceptions. If someone's has got lifetime allowance, got enhanced fixed protection for pension savings, then they do not have to be enrolled or re-enrolled, those sort of things. So next PQT, hopefully.
Next PQT, we'll have a more detailed pension update.
And I'll also hopefully have an update on, I don't know, unless Simon knows, you've heard anything yet, anyone on the panel about the net pay arrangement paying the tax relief that people are missing, because that was 24-25 to be processed 26-27, possibly later because IT systems need to be developed in HMRC. That's all gone silent from my perspective. I just have it on my radar for the future, but probably not one for now, but for next PQT, unless someone's got a thought on it.
Okay, that's cool. No, we'll watch this space for our next PQT. 2 subjects there we'll definitely be tackling. So please do sign up again. The next PQT will of course be on June the 3rd. Registrations will be open very soon at sdworks.co.uk/PQT. PQT. Huge thank you to everyone that's still with us at the moment for putting all of your questions to the panel. Just had a comment from Angela saying, absolutely amazing PQT, so interesting, so informative, so thank you. Someone, Cheryl's come in to say, thank you, I've been in Payroll for many years, but this has been extremely valuable. Lots and lots of positive comments. Thank you ever so much for all of you attendees that joined us today on May's PQT. Please join us again on the 30th of June. And of course, for myself, Lou, Simon, Sam, and Andy, a huge thank you to all of you. We love bringing this show to our attendees, so I hope you've enjoyed it today, and I look forward to bringing it back to you all again in June. Thank you, our panel, and thank you, everybody else. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.